Blog Talk Radio.
Great unknown.
The wild innocence that sprung from your eyes was just enough to mesmerize those who dare to look. A chance I took, though I understood things were not great but were looking good, and you thought I was kidding with the look that I gave. But I told you in a gesture all I needed to say. Her hair shudders in the wind, eyes darkest brown. She moves like a phantom whisper with slow gesture and little sound. Soliloquy, wind lullaby, a full moon on the rise, words that were never spoken, revealed in smiling eyes. Wafting through the breeze lengths of silky hair, as gentle as her feather voice, parting the winter air. Wide expansing clouds recede as the sunset dies away, and I'm sure that I can satisfy her mood in every way. A summer dream of beaches, exploring exotic isles. I'd come to know you better, hanging out with you a while. Sharing space with you, I'd become familiar with your ways, learn about what turns you out and how you like to spend your days. What kind of music you listen to, the different books you read, the people who've inspired you to live the life you lead. I'll tell you of myself, though you may never believe, the things that I've come to know from things I've chanced to read. From heaven's loft of floating dreams, another sunrise for you and me. And who are all these weird people wandering about in this strange reality? Sunshine drips from our faces. We trip the dark expanse of stars. Come with me, she says, to another place far from this one of ours. If chances were never given, wild adventure never sought, myths would never be lived, poetry never wrought. The people would never rise to fight against tyrant kings, and the jealous pagan gods would never be appeased by empty offerings. Kings would never war or conspire against things they know as right. Seers would never teach or abuse the insight of their lives. Spirit would never impart wisdom through startling dreams, and the impossible Messiah would be left lost and wandering. Damsels would never cry or weave their lovely spells. History would never unfold the way prophecies foretell. I myself, seduced by wind, go places never seen. I have to seek out the forgotten myths and live out the hero's dream. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv. It's a 5 p.m. Sabbath broadcast as we stream here out of Athens, Georgia, or near Athens, Georgia. And it is a beautiful spring day. We've been busy planting and putting different plants in the ground, and very strange roses. One that it seems that people have never heard about. It's called a Neil Diamond rose, and another one called a black dragon rose. And these are, I've never seen them. They seem to be some kind of hybrid rose, but the blooms on them are very, very beautiful. And I'm hoping that after a few years we'll be blessed by some of the unfolding blossoms. But I would, encourage you to look them up in a Google search and just search images and see, how I've never seen roses like this, and they're beautiful. And I think that this is really the first time that these Neil Diamond roses have even been made available. I don't know if they've, somehow have come new upon the scene, but from what I understand, this is the first year that they're being offered, and it's beautiful mix of white and pink and white and purple, and they're swirled together. And then the other ones are a deep velvet swirled with white, and really extravagant and exotic looking, and looking forward to spending future springs with them in bloom. And for those of you that know, have listened to my shows for a while now, I find great inspiration from nature and from the unfolding creation, and just being a part of it and witness to it every day. I see the Most High reflected in all things, and to me, I don't understand how people could not. But I think the greatest film, the greatest movie show or TV show you could ever watch is just the unfolding of a day and the way that creation moves from day to night and spring, summer, fall, and winter. That's the best movie going, in my opinion, and how so many people ignore it and don't take time to really drink from the beauty, the extravagance of all things that surround us, because really the creation is just such an incredibly awesome and beautiful place. And even though we are seated in a fallen world and that we are living in a fallen state of being, still the universe is a reflection of its connecting link to God. And so I'm very, very grateful. And I'm glad, Jose, that you're finally getting a chance to read my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. Hope that it blesses your life. A lot of people are telling me that, that particular book and the Sons of God and the Skyfall, that those three books are skeleton keys for unlocking so much that is veiled within the Word, and that once you wade through and make it through each one of those, that the Bible and also the extra biblical, extra canonical texts, they seem to make sense in a way that otherwise might not have. And I know that many of you have already been brought to a similar discernment on a lot of things that we share insight upon. And I know this by the way that many of you have joined our main website, fallenangels.tv, which is a truth network where we can fellowship and share dialogue just as we do here in the chat room. But that I can tell by the way that you answer the profile questions, where you are in your walk and how far you've progressed in your seeking. Not saying, that I have all of the answers or that I am in any way more advanced in my searching and in my discoveries than any of you. Not saying that at all. But truth is truth, and those that share it, we recognize that in each other. And, we can tell how much it impacts your life by the way people are, and that's with every thought, every act, every behavior. If you are truly living with Christ in your heart and seeking the kingdom as priority, it absolutely is easily recognizable by others within the world. And, the same thing goes for those that are not, that have not come to the revelation of, Christ being Savior, Messiah, the way, the truth, and the light. But certainly those that come to that knowing, that absolute understanding, and that recognition with the connecting link to the Most High God and the Creator, there's no denying, and it's easily recognizable within others. Today I'm going to share with you, this will be part 2 in the series for what will be a 5-part, because I've been asked, for those of you that do know, I've been asked to do a 5-part series, 30 minutes each, for the Prophecy Club. And so I have been working on an outline recently, and I've put it together, and I'm going to share that outline with you today. And this will be the second aspect of it, which covers the fall. The first one had to do with the dominion of Christ, the iniquity of Lucifer, and also the wars in heaven, which led to the Second World Age, the beguilement of Eve, and the enmity with the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And so those are some of the things that we're going to be covering today. And again, those of you that have been following my research, that have been listening to the shows that I do, both here on blogtalkradio.com and also on Revolution Radio, I've covered a lot of this material in great depth, and I've shared it freely with the world everywhere that I can, so that people can come to discernment on what is veiled within the Word, so that they can understand the gospel in a way that transforms them and hopefully brings them to remembrance of self and, of their first estate, and also their connection to the Creator and to His Son, which, again, is transforming both inside and out. And so, also, I want to start this show by acknowledging a question that my friend Nancy had put to me about Genesis 1 and 2 and the two different creations. And she did send me an article, and I didn't read through the entirety of the article, but I feel like I got the gist of it, which the person had mentioned that in Genesis 1 and 2, that the first 7 days of creation are spoken of in orderly, as far as the scheme of how the Most High brought all things into being, and that there was on the seventh day, a day of rest. And then it says after that there was these are the generations of the heavens, and then it goes into an accounting, almost like a repeat of the story of Adam and Eve. And she had asked me if I thought that, that what was being spoken of as far as the creation of Adam and Eve was a repeat of the first 7 days of creation, and it was just being reiterated in a way to emphasize, their particular creation. And I understand the point that the person is bringing forth in his article, but in my mind, they are absolutely not the same, and I'll give you my reasons why. Let me pull up the particular passage so that I know what I'm talking about, and then we'll try to give just a little bit of time to this, because I think it's a really good question, and I understand also, like I said, what the person that wrote the article And if you're interested in the article, you can find it on my Facebook page. Nancy had posted it as a comment, and you can find it just a little ways down. Also know that I'm not a big Facebook user. I do go there to list my shows, and I try to keep up with the questions that all of you are asking me, but I do ask you to give me just a little bit of time, because I don't use Facebook other than to post my shows. I don't spend a great deal of time, on there. I do try to also keep up with the Sons of God study group that Dolores has started for all of us to be able to speak about the pre-existence, our first estate, how we are, part of the Sons of God, and that we are trapped in fallen flesh form now. And so I do look over some of that, but, as I said, I don't spend a whole lot of time reading the other groups or being too involved there. I really don't have the time to dedicate to it, and then I don't even, get a chance to spend a whole lot of time on Fallen Angels TV, which is where I would more rather dedicate my time in answering questions for people there and in focusing on all the content and the material that you are all posting up there and sharing with each other, and trying to prevent the spammers and the scammers and those that are trying to take advantage of others on that particular website. And so anyways, the reason why I say that the creature that's being created here in what is Genesis 1, verse 26, and it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creepeth on the earth. And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." All right, the reason why I think this particular creature, that this is pre-Adamic man that is being spoken about here, and pre-Adamic man before the corruption and the experimentation of the fallen angels with the this particular being, is that first the emphasis on "and God created," meaning the collective, the Elohim, with the Most High God and the angels that serve. And then if you notice that this particular being was told to have dominion and also to be fruitful and multiply. And then after it says, the 7 days of creation, and the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, and on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And then, verse 4, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth, when they were created in the day that the Lord God had made the earth and the heavens." Now, the emphasis on this next particular creature and this next particular being is that it says the Lord God. The emphasis is on Lord God forming this particular man from the dust of the ground, and that this particular being was given the breath of life, meaning that, given a spirit, given a soul, and that this particular being also was put in a place called paradise. Even though we're speaking of paradise as being a garden, for those of you that do your research on paradise, you find that paradise was not on the earth, and that when they were beguiled from paradise, and then they were transformed into flesh and put on the earth in the Garden of Eden, or what, if you want to call it the Garden of Eden, call it the Cave of Treasures, which is the first place that Adam and Eve lived. And also another book that you can look to for reference is the first book of Adam and Eve, which speaks about all of the, in details, all of the transformations that took place from their being bright-natured and spiritual, immortal beings to being caught up in the flesh and having to depend on food and water, and that also it would be here that they would procreate, and also that Satan would beguile Eve, impregnate her with Cain, and that there would be the enmity between the two different bloodlines, and that Adam also would have to work the ground in order to bring sustenance to feed his children. And so paradise and what is the Cave of Treasures on the earth is they're two different places. And that the original, if you want to call it the Garden of Eden, or paradise is what I prefer to refer to it as. The paradise is found in the third heaven, and it is also part of what would be that space that encompasses the city of Jerusalem, and that there's a dividing gulf. It's part of the place of the righteous and the elect, and that there's this dividing gulf. The Arturasian lake is in between the place of the wicked and also the place of the righteous, and that the patriarchs from Adam to the thief on the cross that were taken up in the first resurrection, they find their place there now. That is their place of habitation. They have already been returned to their first estate. And so that's the difference in my mind. And so in Genesis 1, you have the pre-Adamic man and all of the other creatures being created and the earth being created. All of that is a reflection of everything that had happened in the heavens and also here upon the earth. And then in Genesis 2, you have the special creature and creation of Adam and Eve, and that this is a reflection of modern humanity. And also I would like to emphasize that the first creature, the pre-Adamic human that was here prior, if you read the Sumerian teachings, and also I quote from and share the details on this in my 6th book, Sons of God, this particular pre-Adamic human was much like a Bigfoot type of creature. It speaks about in the text how he was fully covered in reddish hair, almost like a lion's mane, and that the arms were longer, and that they did not have the ability to speak or language or the ability to write, that they could only grunt. They didn't cook their food, or they did not, and also they did not, as it says, they didn't work the ground, because another thing that is emphasized in verse 5, there was not a man to till the ground, meaning that the pre-Adamic humans, they did not have that ability, nor did they have the ability to cattle, to be shepherds and to domesticate animals. And they didn't cook their food. They drank from the rivers and the lakes, and they ate of the roots and the vegetables and the herbs of the field. And even, humanity, when we were first here, we didn't eat meat. It wasn't until after the flood of Noah's day and the covenant with Noah that humanity was given the blessings to eat meat. the giants were the first ones to cannibalize creatures and to eat meat. And so that's the difference. And even in the Sumerian teachings, and I shared this also in my book, there's an emphasis in what they call the primitive worker, which is this particular creature. And even though they went through all these different experimentations and also engaging in a bestiality with this particular being, they were unable to get it to the point that where modern humanity, when it arrived on the scene, and they called this creature the civilized man. And there's a difference even in the Sumerian accounts. And again, I share those passages in my book, Sons of God, to show the differentiation. And that, you know, they also, scientists speak about the sudden appearance of the hyoid bone, which gave humans, modern humans, the ability to speak and to share language, and, you know, the ability, all the you know, it was with modern humanity that we had the ability to write and also to farm and to domesticate animals. And so all those things came about with the modern creation of Adam and Eve after their fall to the earth. And so I hope that explains the details and the differences. And again, the God and Lord God, there's an emphasis between the differences between the two. Whereas collective Elohim and what I call the Morning Star Administration was responsible for bringing all other things into being initially, then the Most High God, the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit, they were the ones that specifically created Adam and Eve. All right. Now, I'm going to share with you the outline for what I'm going to be doing in the 5 shows that I will be a guest on to cover, you know, the most important aspects of my work. Also, I want to let you know, Don, that I did get your email and your feedback, and I appreciate you, brother, for sharing all that with me, and I did take that into consideration when I brought together this outline on what it was that I wanted to cover in the scope of those 5 shows, because as we all know, 30 minutes and 5 shows is really not a lot of time, and that the scope of my work covers so much that really each one of these 5 topics, I could spend hours, literally hours, in detail covering all of the information that I have which pertains to each aspect. And so, as I had told you earlier, and the first show that I did last week on the Rebel Angels, the first topic will be the war in heaven. And under that topic, I've got it broken down into 5 subsets. The dominion of Christ, let there be light. The iniquity of Lucifer. And the insurrection and temptation of the angels, the third part. And this part, in this third part, I will cover the sons of God, the counsel of the mighty, pre-existence and predestination, our first estate, and those chapters like Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, where the word of the Lord says to Jeremiah, I knew you before you ever entered into the womb, and I have foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. And there are, of course, many other sources that I can reference which connects to that. Ephesians chapter 1, where it speaks of us being predestinated, and things like Jacob I favored, Esau I hated, things like that. The next one under the war in heaven is the separation of light and darkness. This is the division of the forces of good and evil, and also how the visible world came from what was the imperishable and invisible world, or the upper heavens. The lower heavens, including our third dimensional reality, which is part of the visible and fallen world. Here we learn through the dual nature of good and evil, and we have, are learning also the knowledge of good and evil from this dual nature binary world. The fifth part of the war in heaven will be the fall of the rebel angels, which I covered in great detail on the show that I did last week. Part 2 will be focused on the prior times. This is when, according to the Sumerian king list and also Berosus and Mantheo as historians of the prior times, and when the quote gods, the little gods with little g, ruled upon the planet after they were cast out of the heavens on the second day. This second part will cover that. It's broken into 3 subsets. The first is the Tohu Wabohu, and how the earth became null and void. I'll speak on Jeremiah 4, verse 23, speaking about how all the birds of the heaven were fled and the cities of the plains were destroyed, and this was at a time when there was yet no man. Ezekiel chapter 26, speaking about the destruction of Atlantis, and and how it was drowned and put in the bottom of the ocean. And then I'm going to talk about a few of these previous civilizations and how it was that, because there was a flood during that time as well, and it was only a partial flood. I believe it was like 1/3 of the 1/3 of the earth was involved in this particular flood. It's also mentioned in the book of Jasher that there was a flood before the flood of Noah's day, and so you can look to that as a source reference for what I'm speaking about. But you'll find that even during the prior times, that they had built in the upper, on the tops of mountains, places like Tiahuanaco, Machu Picchu, Göbekli Tepe, things like that. And then you have other civilizations that were drowned before this particular flood, which includes Atlantis, places like Yonaguni, which is off the coast of Japan, and where people find, these megalithic structures in this massive city temple complex, hundreds of feet under the ocean, and that these cities were destroyed and also were built and occupied by the fallen ones at a time prior to the modern creation of Adam and Eve. And so, that is just further confirmation as to the rebel angels being here upon the planet prior to our ancestors and the beginning of the Second World Age, which that's the third topic and the third aspect of what I will be covering is the Second World Age, which has to do with what is referenced in Genesis chapter 2, after the creation of the heavens and the earth, or the generations of the heavens. Let me go ahead and look at that again. Where it says, Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Also, I explain in my 6th book, Sons of God, I begin after the introduction, I begin it with the timeline for creation, where I did a show called Genesis Revisited. You can find it in the archives and also on YouTube. But in the show and also in that Genesis timeline, I explain in detail what is going on in Genesis chapter 1, going through, the dividing of the separation of light and darkness, also the dividing of the firmament, the dividing of the waters, and how that was connected to the destruction of Tiamat and what is referred to as also the Tohu Wabohu, where the earth became null and void. And also, that this particular episode, the first destruction of what was then known as Tiamat, which is the old earth, that is the incident which gave us also the asteroid belt, because that's where the earth used to be, and that the comets and the asteroids were also created from that particular cataclysmic event. This event is, spoken about in the Enuma Elish and the older creation stories, and that it's also how the different planets, like Saturn, got their rings, because that is all dust and debris from the destruction of what was the old earth. And it was also that destruction that took place long ago that is spoken of also in Genesis 2, where it speaks about how that in the prior earth it had not yet rained upon the earth, because Tiamat, the old earth, was much like the outer planets that have this thick cloud, this thick belt of clouds surrounding what would be a solid core, and that this particular canopy prevented sun from getting in, and also that it wasn't raining and causing storms. And it wasn't until after the destruction of the planet that the earth and the land appeared, as it says in Genesis chapter 1. The oceans took their, and the rivers and all that took their, became, encapsulated by land. Before then, the earth was encompassed by one solid and full ocean. There was no land yet. Anyways, all of that is spoken about in my 6th book, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here. And I also give greater detail about that event in my 7th book, Skyfall, The Angels of Destiny. All right, so continuing with the outline, and then I'll get into the topic for today. Which, this is also covering what I'm going to be speaking about. And so, in the third part, in the second part where I'm talking about it is the third part, the Second World Age, that it was after the beguilement of Eve, and I explained the garden parable, that this is what led to the fall of humanity, and that this is also what led to our banishment from the kingdom, meaning it was from paradise and the third heaven that Adam and Eve were banished from, and that the cherubim of fire was placed there to prevent their return. And also that they were banished here to the earth, and that their bodies were transformed from that of being immortal and angelic, bright-natured beings to that of being of flesh, and being their spirits, the breath of life, being housed almost like armor of soul in flesh form, and that it was on the earth that the prophecies of Genesis 3 would be fulfilled, in that Satan would beguile Eve, impregnating her. You know, the initial beguilement took in paradise, but it wasn't until she was transformed into flesh on the 8th day and placed here on the earth that she was impregnated with Cain. And that it was here that Adam would have to work the soil, and that there would be enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And I explain all this in great detail also in my 6th book, Sons of God. I explain the two different, the Adam created, Adam of paradise, created on the 6th day, and also the transformation, their transformation into flesh, which occurred on the 8th day. Now, the next part, the 4th aspect, has to do with Genesis 6 and the sons of God, the daughters, and mixing and marrying the daughters of Cain. And it would be here that we would have the creation of the giants, the corruption and miscegenation, the flood of Noah's day, the enmity again between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and that this would be reflected in the division of Jacob and Esau, even though they were both children of Isaac, but that and Rachel, and that they were both born of the seed of the woman. Esau gave up his birthright, and so the children of Esau are counted among the seed of the serpent. In the next part, the 12 tribes versus the sons of Esau, which if you read the book of Jasher, it gives great detail about after, Dinah, the sister of the brothers of the 12 tribes, when she was raped, and then they went in and slaughtered all the men of Shechem. And then what is not shown in the account in the King James Version of the Bible or the Old Testament is that they went to war with many of the cities of the sons of Esau, and what would be considered the Kenite or the seed of the serpent, the kings that were ruling in the land of Canaan. And the beginning of the slaughter of the city of Shechem and the people of Shechem was just the beginning of what was a long fight and wars between the sons of Jacob, and then also the sons of Esau. The next part, the wars between Joshua and the inhabitants of Canaan, where they found giants in the land, continuing with David and Goliath, and then also Sebachai and Saph, which Saph was one of the brothers of Goliath. He had 4 different brothers, and everybody's familiar with David and Goliath, but what they don't realize is that the Bible is full of hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, of historical accounts of the giants, wars between Israel and the giants, and the hybrid seed lines born from Cain. And that this is also mentioned with the what Christ speaks about in the division of Christ and the Pharisees. And that it also finds its place in what is the division of humanity and the elites, the globalists, the transnationalists that support the New World Order and that are part of the Illuminati agenda to bring on world government. The next aspect would be the parable of the wheat and the tares, with emphasis on Matthew chapter 13, John chapter 8, and Matthew chapter 23. And, again, it's the division of the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, the wise virgins from the foolish virgins. And then the last part would be emphasis on the Nakash, the dragon of Revelation 12, the mythology surrounding the dragon, and also that of the pagan gods, the Old Testament gods, and the dragon mythology, and also the historical and ancient worship of the feathered serpent as the Nakash. And that two things that I will be emphasizing in discussing those particular topics is, one, the Testament of Amram, and the Emerald Tablet, the 8th tablet of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which are, speak about the seraphim angels, and also how it was that they took over the councils of the ruling elite, and that they possessed them in order to bring forth their agenda, which also aligns with what I spoke about as far as the division of humanity with that of the New World Order. All right. I'm going to go ahead and spend the last aspect of this show speaking about the fall, and to try to elaborate on this for you. Again, the fall from paradise, as I spoke about with the differences in the creature, the pre-Adamic human that was here in Genesis chapter 1, and the Adam and Eve that were given the breath of life, and that initially it was Adam, and that, as I have stated in other shows, that Adam, when he was initially created, he was hermaphroditic, much like the other angels of heaven, and that he was placed with the other angels, and that it speaks about how two... I'm going to answer your question here in just a minute, Jackie, because this has to do with what you're asking about. All right, and so the third heaven is part of the visible worlds, and that Lucifer and the fallen angels, now you can see this reference in both the Ascension of Isaiah and also the book of Enoch, where they are taken up through the 10 heavens. In the case of Enoch, he is brought before the face of the Son, which, is the only begotten, and that Christ tells him how he had created the heavens and the earth, the generations of the heavens and the earth, and he cites all that in detail. And that in the book, the Ascension of Isaiah, Isaiah is taken up and brought before the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that he watches the descent of Christ through the heavens to take form as a child in the womb of the Virgin Mary. But both of them give an account as to how the fallen angels and Lucifer, they have access all the way up to the 5th heaven, and that they cannot go any higher than the 5th heaven. And how that there are angels on both the left and the right once they go through the 5 heavens, and then once they pass the 5th heaven, there are only angels on the right, which are the angels of the Most High. And so Jackie had asked in the chat room a question on, were the Nakash in Eden? Yes, they were in Eden. And that's why you found Satan in paradise, because the fallen angels and the angels of the Most High, they have access all the way through the 5 heavens, and then the angels of the Most High that serve Christ and the Father and the Son, they have access all the way through the 10 heavens. And that there, it speaks about in different stories that paradise was tended by 200 angels, and not just, the good angels. We find also that Satan had tended paradise, and that's why we find him there and able to beguile Adam and Eve, and that he was the one that had planted the vine. And there's a book called the Genesis Apocryphon, and the Baruch, the pseudepigraphal book called Baruch II, which is the Slavonic edition, and Baruch III, which is the Ethiopic edition, and they speak about how Satan had planted the vine, and he did so in order that there could be, wine made from the vine, and that the wine would serve his purposes in, causing drunkenness and to people to lose good judgment. It also has beneficial effects as well. That wine, can be good, utilized for sickness, and this is also mentioned again in the Genesis Apocryphon, because in that book, Noah after he lands and he comes out and builds an altar, and he worships the Most High, and he gives thanks for his deliverance and his family's deliverance through the flood that destroyed, all other creatures and all living flesh. He starts to plant all of the different, vines and different plants and different things that he found on the face of the earth. And he comes to the vine, the grapevine, and in the story he says he recognizes this as being part of why Adam had fallen. And he didn't want to plant it, but the Father said that whereas it had been a curse to the sons of humanity and to the children of humanity prior to the flood, that it would also be a blessing, and that it would have medicinal purposes. And so you can refer to that story. Jackie also asked, wasn't Noah shiny when he was born? Yes, it says in the accounts that his hair was like snow, like white snow, and that he was like he was on fire. He was glowing, and that his eyes also radiated brightness, and that people were afraid of him because of his demeanor, and so everybody automatically recognized him as being special. All right, so Adam and Eve, once Eve was split off from Adam, it's my opinion that this is when, that there were actual genders, that Adam and Eve were the first female and male gendered, at this time, angelic beings, which most angels are, again, in my opinion, hermaphroditic, in that they represent the wholeness of the creation, which is a marriage of both male and female. And again, my opinion is that God and even though we call him the Father, and that Christ is referred to as the Son, that they are also hermaphroditic, and that they are both male and female, and that the creation is a reflection of their being whole in both aspects. And that's why it says in Genesis that when we come together with our spouses, with our loved ones, and we unite in making love, that we become one flesh. And again, in my opinion, that's what it's speaking about. And so after Eve was split off from Adam, and there's stories that talk about how Adam was taking care of the male creatures and Eve took care of the female creatures, and they both were tending to different aspects of paradise. And it was during this time that the creatures also spoke in Hebrew, and that Hebrew was the original language of paradise. There's somewhere in the text that speaks about when we are restored to our first estate, that we will speak again in the colloquial language, which is the vernacular of paradise, which is Hebrew, an ancient form of Hebrew, which was the original language, even prior to the Tower of Babel, when everybody spoke in one language, that this was also a form of Hebrew. And that if you read the book of Jasher, in the book of Jasher, it speaks about how, I think it's either Jasher or Jubilees, but one of them, in the first part, the part like Genesis, which parallels Genesis and the fall of humanity, it talks about how the creatures were able to speak. And it wasn't until after Adam and Eve had fallen and that they found themselves upon the earth, that the creatures of the earth were not allowed to speak, and that language was stripped from them. And that's also why you see in paradise how the serpent, the Nakash, the feathered serpent, he also was endowed with language and with understanding, and he was able to speak to Adam and Eve, and also to God, that he had this ability. He was what we refer to as an enchanter or magician, that he was one of the angels that had the capacity, more so than what we see within a serpent or a creature that is of the earth. Okay. And so, let me look at So, speaking about Paradise Lost, which is the title of the show, Paradise Lost for the rebel angels and the fallen angels that joined Lucifer in his rebellion and in his insurrection, that occurred for them on what is the second day. The separation of light and darkness, and also the division of the forces of both good and evil. And that when the angels were cast out of the upper heavens, they assumed authority and were granted temporary reign over that of the lower heavens, which again includes the heavens 1 through 5. And that once they were banished on the second day, which you can find reference to this in the second book of Enoch, called the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, it refers to how Enoch is told by the Word, the only begotten, Christ, that he had cast out Lucifer and the rebel angels that joined him on the second day, and that they found themselves floating or suspended in the atmosphere over the bottomless, is what the reference is. And so, after the creation of Adam and Eve, and they're being placed in paradise on the sixth day, this is when Lucifer found his opportunity to beguile Adam and Eve and to take his revenge against Christ. Because it was Christ who had cast them out of the upper heavens and banished them to the lower heavens into what is referred to as the dark earth. And so that's what he did. That was the plan. That was what he had decided to do in order to place Adam and Eve and all of the ancestors and children born to them under his authority, because they would fall to what would be this fallen earth and to this visible third dimensional reality that we find ourselves in now, and that they would also be transformed into flesh form. And also that the fallen angels, they had part in what would be the creation of our bodies of flesh. That our bodies of flesh have a dual nature, a dual aspect. That the breath of life, that part of us that was created by the Most High God and that was given to Adam and Eve, that is the part of us that is our spirit, and that it is our spirit that is found within our bodies of flesh. And that if you read in the Gnostic text, and also I believe it's one of the books of Enoch, I can't remember if it is indeed the book of Enoch, but anyways, there's a very detailed account, and you can find this in my 6th book, Sons of God, again. There's a detailed account as to each one, the different parts of the body, and how a different angel was responsible for these different parts of our body. And that when our bodies were created, that it was a marriage of the spirit with that of the flesh, and that it was both the good angels and the fallen angels that had part to play within the creation of our flesh being. And so that shows to you why it is that we have, you know how in the cartoons, especially in Disney, that they show how we have one angel on our left shoulder that is a representation of the devil, and that tempts us into committing sin, into doing bad or negative or evil things, and that the angel on our right shoulder is whispering into our other ear and is imploring us to stay on the narrow path and to do good and to perform random acts of kindness to others and taking care of others and helping others. Well, that is truly the way that it is, that we have within us this division, this split, and that our minds, that our brains, and that part of us that is ruled by the physical and our flesh and our carnal aspects, that part of us wants us to focus and to prioritize that of the flesh and the carnal aspects of the world. And in the other part of us, our spiritual aspect, and that part of us that is the connecting link to the Creator. It wants us to focus on a return to our first estate, a focus on salvation and our eternal inheritance, and in working for the things of the kingdom, those things which are higher in aspect, our role and our mission for coming here into the flesh, those things that we were predestinated for, those parts of us that would work on behalf of the kingdom and others, on the kingdom for others as well. And so, and if you want a greater accounting of this division and how it works within us, I would recommend that you read a book called The Shepherd of Hermas, Hermas, and that this particular book had originally been part of the 80-book canon, and that when it was when the Apocrypha was split off from the original canon, that it was designated as one of these apocryphal or hidden books. But as I said, it had originally been part of the 80-book canon, and that if you read mandate number 6 of that particular manuscript, it speaks about this particular division, and it warns us to not follow the angel of unrighteousness, but to follow the angel of righteousness and to listen to and to adhere to that aspect of us. Because it's also like, we have a conscience, and that part of us lets us know when we are doing good and when we are doing evil, and when we are being tempted by either or. And so, and we know when we are doing good and when we're doing evil. Our bodies and our spirits indwelt in our bodies lets us know. Another question from the chat room: do the bad ones punish us when we try to do good? Absolutely. The fallen angels do not want us to perform good deeds and to do goodness and to do random acts of kindness. And so they are in every way trying to thwart, lead astray, and to deceive humanity. There's a particular passage. I'm going to see if I can find this real quick for you. But it's in the Apocryphon of John, which I had just done a show on not too long ago. And I actually believe that I quoted what I'm about to read in that particular show, because this particular passage, which the Gnostic texts tell us about the archons and how they have led us astray. But this particular passage that I'm going to read illuminates as to how it was that the fallen angels lead us into temptation, and that they are trying to get us to commit evil and to fall into being counted with the wretched ones, with the fallen angels, and to have us lose our first estate and to never inherit the ordinances that they abandoned so long ago. And so I'm looking for this passage. It's very insightful, And it also lets you know how the Archons for a long time have led humanity astray. Okay, here it is. I think I found it. One second. Okay, here it is. This is from the Apocryphon of John. It says this. And he made a plan with his powers. He sent his angels to the daughters of men, that they might take some of them for themselves and raise offspring for their enjoyment. And at first they did not succeed. When they had no success, they gathered together again, and they made a plan together. They created a counterfeit spirit, who resembles the spirit who had descended, so as to pollute the souls through it. And the angels changed themselves in their likeness, into the likeness of their mates, the daughters of men, filling them with the spirit of darkness, which they had mixed for them, and with evil. They brought gold and silver and a gift and copper and iron and metal and all kinds of things. And they steered the people who had followed them into great troubles by leading them astray with many deceptions. They, the people, became old without having enjoyment. They died not having found truth, and without knowing the God of truth. And thus the whole creation became enslaved forever, from the foundation of the world until now. And so you see, this is the story, much like what is spoken of in Genesis chapter 6, about the sons of God mating with the daughters of humanity, specifically the daughters of Cain, and how they gave them gifts and they gave them knowledge. You know, Lucifer is acknowledged as being the light bearer, and that he brought wisdom, the gift of both, the knowledge of good and evil, and our chance to live in this world of duality, which to me is not a gift at all. It's more a curse, even though we see, this is a marriage of both heaven and earth, in that we are learning from pain and pleasure, and both the knowledge of good and evil. But our return to our first estate is going to be much better, a much better existence than what we find ourselves living in now, because there will be no evil, there will be no devil, there will be no demons, and there will be no lying and no curses, as far as the commitment of committing of evil by neither humanity or of fallen angels. And so what a blessing that will be. But again, it says, and they steered the people who had followed them into great troubles by leading them astray with many deceptions. And they, the people, became old without having enjoyment. They died not having found truth and without knowing the God of truth. Thus the whole creation became enslaved forever, from the foundation of the world until now. And that pretty much sums it up, and that's why I think that the reading of the different Gnostic texts, it can give you insight into what occurred long ago, because they specifically detail who the Archons are, which the Archons is just a Gnostic term for who the Nephilim are, or what the Sumerian call the Anunnaki, who the History Channel is trying to get everybody to believe that the ancient aliens are our creators, and that the the ascended masters and those new age gurus that are supposedly coming down to save us, that they are benevolent and that they are working on behalf of humanity, which is a complete lie. And the scenario is going to be brought forth that there's a good alien and a bad alien, and that the good aliens are going to save us, and that they're here to fight the bad aliens, which the good aliens are going to be the Nordic type, the ones that are humanoid in appearance, and that they're going to banish and fight against the reptilian angel, the feathered serpent, or the Nakash, which they are both working in tangent together in order to deceive humanity and lead many astray, which they will, because it speaks about in the Bible also that the strong delusion would deceive even the very elect, if it were possible. Thank you, Idle Daily. He posted the passage of Daniel chapter 2, verse 43. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they will not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. They will mingle themselves with the seed of men, meaning those are the Archons, the Anunnaki, the ancient aliens, and they're absolutely something other than the seed of men. They are the seed of the serpent, and that we would have this enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent until Christ returns again, and that there would be the harvest. We would have the separation of the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, and that would be the fulfillment. That would be when rapture occurs, the final trump, the final day. After that, it's game over. So be perpetually ready, people, because even though it's my opinion that we still have some years left, and that the sign of Revelation 12 with a virgin clothed in the sun with the moon beneath her feet and the child within her womb and a crown of 12 stars, that this particular celestial alignment occurs on the Feast of Trumpets, September 23rd, 2017, that this will be a very special day. As to whether this will be the final trump and the fulfillment of all prophecy, I don't know, but I do know that it will be absolutely critical and important for all of humanity, and even the fallen angels will be watching out for that. And so, again, it's my opinion that we have at least from now till that particular day to be here, to endure, and to do what we can to help others and that of ourselves. So be perpetually ready. Perpetually ready. God bless all. May the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit lead you in discernment, guide you, watch over you, your family members, your loved ones, your pets even. And may you make the kingdom your priority, and focus on your salvation, your eternal inheritance, that aspect of who we are that is the part of us that will go on to bear the fruit of our role and our mission and our remembrance here upon the planet. And I pray that all of us have a return to our first estate and that we take over those ordinances that the fallen angels abandoned so long ago, and that we inherit the positions that they gave up in trying to be as gods themselves. Good night, all. God bless.
Blog Talk Radio.
The wild innocence that sprung from your eyes was just enough to mesmerize those who dare to look. A chance I took, though I understood things were not great but were looking good. And you thought I was kidding with the look that I gave. But I told you in a gesture all I needed to say. Her hair shudders in the wind, eyes darkest brown. She moves like a phantom whisper with slow gesture and little sound. Soliloquy, wind lullaby, a full moon on the rise, words that were never spoken, revealed in smiling eyes. Wafting through the breeze lengths of silky hair, as gentle as her feather voice, parting the winter air. Wide expansing clouds recede as the sunset dies away, and I'm sure that I can satisfy her mood in every way. A summer dream of beaches, exploring exotic isles. I'd come to know you better, hanging out with you a while. Sharing space with you, I'd become familiar with your ways, learn about what turns you out and how you like to spend your days. What kind of music you listen to, the different books you read, the people who've inspired you to live the life you lead. I'll tell you of myself, though you may never believe, the things that I've come to know from things I've chanced to read. From heaven's loft of floating dreams, another sunrise for you and me. And who are all these weird people wandering about in this strange reality. Sunshine drips from our faces. We trip the dark expanse of stars. Come with me, she says, to another place, far from this one of ours. If chances were never given, wild adventure never sought, myths would never be lived, poetry never wrought.
Without borders and